welcome back to my channel. This is Dom, and a new sort of occasional series that I'm going to be doing, more for the historical buffs rather than the wargamers. So a little while ago I picked this book up when I was in Shropshire. I go to Shropshire an awful lot, stay in Ludlow, which is a wonderful place if you ever get to go there. And this book I picked up was Castles of the Marches. Now, this is a really geeky book if you're into castles, as I am. This actually lays out a list and a little bit of detail on all the March castles. Now, people might be aware the March region is the border area, basically between Wales and England. It was ruled by the Marcher Lords. They were assigned initially by William Conqueror when he invaded Britain, and he decided that the Welsh were going to be too much trouble to deal with, so he gave huge swathes of the border area to these Marcher Lords who were like little kings in their own rights, had the right to build castles and basically carry out whatever justice they felt necessary in the border regions to keep the dastardly Welsh out. Later on they invaded Wales, and anyway, it's a different story. But this book shows the basics of where all these castles were built, and there's about 120 of them listed in here. Not all of them still exist. Some of them are just little, piles of stone. Some of them not even that. Some of them have been changed from their original castle design into something more grand. But I thought it's a fun project for me and Mrs. Boots to go and visit every single one of them in this book. And actually we found a few more besides who aren't technically Marcher castles, but also damn good castles. So this series will basically be taking me through all these different castles, a little bit of historical background, and I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please share, like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the castles. So next up on my journey around the Marcher castles, we've got Croft Castle, which is it's somewhat disappointing, but the history makes up for it. A country house. It's a Grade 1 listed building in the village of Croft in Herefordshire. Now, the modern day building is not a patch on probably what was there back in the day. Some of the owners have made it look a lot older than it actually is, because of building false walls and what have you, which excite you as a history fanatic as you walk in. But the house itself is nonetheless very, very interesting. The original estate was apparently founded by Bernard de Croft, a Norman knight, as is the case with a lot of these Marcher castles, and first recorded in the Domesday Book in 1085. And it basically continued in the Croft family until it was taken over by the National Trust in around about the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, 1960s. So the site of the current manor house was originally a castle. We don't know much about it at all. There isn't much detail. But certainly in the 1390s, Sir John de Croft was being noted as marrying Jeanne, daughter of Owen Glendur, in the 1390s. And it's thought that the Welsh leader's victory over Sir Edward Mortimer at the Battle of Grey's Blass in Powys in 1402, and he sent troops to occupy the Croft site. During the Wars of the Roses itself, there was the Sir Richard Croft, who was then the Lord of the Manor of Croft. He had a very colourful history. He fought at Tewkesbury, that amazingly bloody battle. He also fought alongside Edward, 4th Duke of York, at the nearby Battle of Mortimer's Cross in 1461. And as a result of that, apparently became a trusted confidant when Edward was crowned king. Mortimer's Cross is literally just down the road, and in fact, the Battle of Mortimer's Cross took place on Croft land. Sir Richard Croft's wife, Eleanor, served as governess to Edward IV's sons, better known as the Princes in the Tower, who, having been imprisoned there by their uncle Richard III, disappeared without any trace. Some suggest that Sir Richard Croft was involved in those disappearances. Through the Tudor period, Sir Richard Croft, as then, became Henry VII treasurer, treasurer to the household and steward to the king's son, Prince Arthur, when he and Catherine and Aragon resided in the Ludlow Castle in 1501 to 2. Sir Richard's grandson, Sir James Croft, served Edward VI as Lord Deputy of Ireland, but was later implicated in the infamous 1554 Wyatt's rebellion against Mary I. He was eventually pardoned and became Elizabeth I's controller of the royal household in 1570. Sir James probably pulled down the old castle, creating a more comfortable house around that sort of time in the 1570s. So it was really another civil war that had the most devastating impact on the Crofts themselves in the 17th century. Sir James's grandson, Sir Herbert Croft, built the shell of the present castle in the early 17th century before converting to Catholicism and retiring to a Benedictine monastery in France. 3 of his sons inherited Croft. The eldest son, Sir William Croft, fought with the Royalist army during the Civil War, and after a fierce battle against the parliamentarians at Stokesay Castle, which is also fairly close by, in 1645, he was killed on the retreat to Croft. The second son, James Croft, also fought in the Civil War, but also died without an heir. So Croft passed to the youngest son, the Reverend Herbert Croft, and he was rewarded for his loyalty to Charles II and was appointed Bishop of Hereford in 1660 and the Dean of the Royal Chapel in 1668. He spent a lot of money restoring the castle following the damage that was inflicted on it by the Civil War. In 1746, Reverend Herbert's son and grandson were connected to Britain's colonial interests. Herbert Croft was given a baronetcy in 1671 and became an MP with links to the East India Company. His son, Sir Arthur Croft, 2nd Bart, invested in the South Seas Company, which speculated on the supply of enslaved Africans to the Spanish Americas on behalf of the British government. Following its collapse in 1720, Sir Archer lost most of the family's wealth and was forced to sell Croft in 1746. This family spent the following 170 years away from Croft Castle, but continued to be a very important part of the British history. But after 170 years, the Croft family managed to rebuy Croft in 1923 for their youngest son, James Croft. Through the 20s and 30s, the castle was brought back to life by Catherine Croft and her children. And when James died in 1941, it was inherited by his cousin, Sir Henry Page Croft. However, he never lived in it, and it was used as a school until 1946. The Croft estate was inherited by Michael, the 2nd Lord of Croft, in 1947. He and his sister Diana worked tirelessly to save Croft for the nation, looking for support from the Land Fund, gathering objects and collections related to the wider Croft family for public display, and ensured it was permanently preserved for the nation by handing it over to the National Trust. So the country house itself of Croft, it's an odd place. It's obviously not as old as the original Marcher Castle would have been.
But it's nonetheless a quite eclectic kind of mixture of property inside. Interesting things to see. Particularly interesting to me was there's a sort of a family tree on the wall, along with the emblem for the Croft family. In fact, the emblem is quite different, because it dates back to the 15th century when the Croft family adopted the Welsh wyvern crest, a wounded black dragon, seen as a sort of allusion to their Glendur heritage. So it's an interesting mixture, as a lot of these border families found that their loyalties were split, should we say, between local. Well, very much their loyalty was for themselves, but also, they weren't against working with the Welsh or the English, depending on how it suited the family. And that seems to have been certainly the early days, while the Crofts were very closely associated with the Mortimers of Wigmore and Ludlow. They very much sort of seem to steer their own course, which is, say, not unusual. The house itself, as I say, is I found a little disappointing, but I thought it was going to be. That's my problem, not theirs. It's nothing spectacular. Doesn't help the fact we were there that it was a particularly wet day. But what I did find very interesting, as the sort of nerdy historian, was the chapel in the grounds just outside the main house. A very small chapel, but it contains the tomb of Sir Richard Croft, who was basically Sheriff of Hereford. And he was the guy that fought at Mortimer's Cross and Tewkesbury, and some would say was implicated in the death of the princes in the Tower. He had a very colourful life. He lived from 1471 and died in 1509. So not only fighting and living through two of the biggest War of the Roses battles, he was MP for Herefordshire, governor of Ludlow Castle. He was created a knight baronet after yet another battle, the Battle of Stoke in 1487. And his tomb, I say, is there. It's quite an impressive looking structure for such a small castle. For such a small chapel, sorry. And I found that particularly appealing. The chapel itself has got some lovely relics of earlier times, including some amazing floor tiles, which again, takes you right back to an earlier time. So all in all, worth a visit for sure. It's part of the National Trust, so if you're in the UK and you're a National Trust member, you can get in here for free. And it's probably worth a visit if you're passing by, if nothing else, to see the temple, see the tomb of Richard Croft himself.